All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Skype a Scientist Live. My name is Sarah McAnulty. I run the Skype a Scientist program. And today we are going to be talking all about zookeeping with our New Orleans zookeeper, Alexi Grousis. So thank you so much for being with us here today, Alexi. We're super excited to have you. And Erin, as always, thank you for signing for us. If you have any questions at home, please submit them whenever you want using the Q&A function at the bottom. Alexi's going to go through some stuff with us, and then we're going to open it up to questions. We have plenty of time to address all of the things that you are curious about. Yeah, Alexi, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I appreciate being on. It's super exciting. We've interacted for over a year online, and so being able to participate in Skype a Scientist is pretty exciting, especially since there has not been very much zookeeper representation. So I am happy to provide that.
Wonderful.
All right, so should I just launch on in?
Do it, yeah.
Excellent. All right, so I put together some pictures and a little slideshow for you guys. So I'm gonna do a quick screen share. There we go. All right. So, zookeeping up with me, Alexi Grousis. So a little bit of background about what an actual keeper is, because a lot of people see us at the zoo and don't really have a full understanding of what we do in the day-to-day. So as a zookeeper, I am mainly the person that is taking care of the animals. Like, pretty obvious, right? But a lot can go into that. There are various levels of what it means to actually take care of the animals. A lot of people think we get to play with our animals. We actually don't get to do that very much, but when we do, it's spectacular. Of course, we have to pick them up for fun and for healthcare, but we'll get into that a little bit later. This little guy right here is Benito. He's one of my favorite alpacas. And if you curious what an alpaca is, I explain it. But what do we do on the day-to-day? So when we're operating in our job, the first thing we're going to do in the morning is make sure that all of our animals are alive, healthy, and make sure that they get food and water. Every animal eats something different. So we have to make sure that all of our animals have a diet that's not only good for them as individuals, whether they're young or old, but also for their species. You know, we're not going to feed a goldfish or a bass the same thing we're going to feed a bald eagle. So all of our animals have very specific diets, and most all of them are going to need water. Now, this little guy right here is a special animal. It's called a prehensile-tailed porcupine. This is actually one of our youngest prehensile-tailed porcupines. This one is only 1 month old and some animals actually have to learn how to eat, which is a lot of the parents' jobs in the wild. So our job as a zookeeper sometimes is to replace that and show them how to eat. Now, if you listen closely, you can hear a little. So this baby is so young that it actually doesn't have its teeth growing in. So it's going through the motions and trying to eat, but it doesn't have the mechanics yet. So that's cool. All right. Now the next thing we're going to do is, if we have the time, we're going to train our animals. So the training can be for enrichment, to make sure their brain is working right, to make sure that they have enough stimulation or that their life is exciting. We also do training so that our animals can learn really important behaviors. Just like how, say, we have to learn to put on our clothes and dress ourselves when we're young, and how we have to learn how to read and write. Our animals have to learn some basic skills too. So those skills can include getting an exam, or they can include, let's say, reaching up for an object. For our elephants, they have to learn how to get their toenails trimmed. Some of our smaller animals also have to learn that same skill. So figuring out how we can teach our animals the things they need to learn, not only for their personal enrichment, but also for their health care. So right here, of our alpacas, Eugene, our biggest one, is actually learning how to go onto a scale early, because we don't want to make our animals do stuff they don't want to do. It's more fun for them if they get a choice in the matter. So by rewarding them for good behavior and for behaviors we want, our animals can feel a sense of enjoyment, possibly, in the behaviors we're teaching them. If nothing else, they enjoy the food that we're giving them. So Eugene got on the scale for the first time in his life, being 3 years old. Now, as I mentioned, some of our animals get trained for healthcare. And so we'll train them to get onto scales so we can see how much they weigh. We can train them to take voluntary injections, just like a lot of us are getting with our COVID vaccines. We can train our animals to get their toenails trimmed, get their teeth trimmed. We can train them to even get eye drops, which is pretty spectacular because I can barely put in eye drops myself. So right here is a pretty cool example. So this snake doesn't need eye drops because snakes actually have a scale that covers their eye. But when venomous snakes need care, we actually have to put a clear tube, and that protects us from them. So those snakes, when they get put into a tube, we can give them an injection, or we can just look at them and make sure that they're healthy. And if we need to do any surgery on them, we can do that. So in a little bit, I'll actually show you guys a video of me actually tubing a snake. It's pretty fun. It's one of my favorite things to do. Now, when our animals, or when we're going through our day, sometimes our animals will break our enclosures. Not their fault. They're just doing what they do. Sometimes our enclosures just aren't up to the task of handling these big or very curious animals. So it's our job as zookeepers to fix anything that breaks, or sometimes we find that our enclosures may be built for an animal, but they don't quite fit the individual. Every animal, just like every person, is an individual. We all have different personalities. So some of them will need different stuff in their enclosures. So we can modify that. We can give it to them. We can think of ways to build this in a way that they like and they can get enjoyment out of. So for this in particular example right here is I had to build a fence for our alpacas. Now they love eating the grass. And as you can see around my boots and around my feet, not a lot of grass. So the alpacas had wiped out all of the grasses. So what I decided to do was build a fence so that we can use to separate the alpacas onto one side of our yard so that the grass can grow up again. So we can shift them back and forth to let the grass grow so that the alpacas then have a good meal giving them food. Now, a really big important part of our job is to make sure that our animals don't get bored. Now, boredom can lead to all sorts of behaviors that we don't really want to see. So our animals, they need stimulation. Some of them, it's important that we don't give them stimulation because it's stressful. But some of them, it's really important that they always get things to play with or puzzles to solve, or even it's just to work for their food. Because not a lot of animals just find piles of food laying around for them in the wild. So we have to stimulate, or we have to simulate or copy what they would be experiencing in the wild. So for example, if you go to the zoo and you see the sea lions are always getting trained. They get trained sometimes 3 times a day. It's a lot of work for their trainers and their keepers. It's really important for the brain of the sea lion because in the wild, a sea lion is miles to hunt fish, and that fish, they run across it, is not going to make it easy for them to get that snack. So a sea lion is going to have to work crazy hard just to catch each individual bite of food. So it's important that we try to make the sea lions work as hard as possible without making it impossible for them to get the food they need. Now, of course, this is a very, very cute example. This right here is 3 of our chinchillas currently enjoying some enrichment. Even though I see this every day, it's my favorite thing. So this right here is chinchillas need this in order to keep their fur dry and clean. It keeps parasites off of them, but their fur is so thick that if it gets wet, it actually mildews like a towel that's been clumped up and thrown in the corner. So we have to keep our chinchillas very, very dry. And if you guys notice in the background, Cusco, my favorite chinchilla, is just running around. He likes to actually jump up walls, and he'll run up, jump off the wall, and then back down again. So this isn't just an opportunity for them to keep themselves clean, but it's an opportunity to run around and exercise and explore and just enjoy being a chinchilla. Now, in these moments, our favorite part of the job is to bond with our animals. We want to build a bond of trust between ourselves and them so that we can accomplish the entire of stuff that you can see on the screen. That bonding is also just fun and rewarding. You know, it gives us an opportunity to just like have a moment of peace and calm, and of course, get that not a lot of people get to do. Like this right here, me hanging out with Gigi, one of our prehensile-tailed porcupines. Like she is a grabber. So if I put anything in front of her, she just grabs it, even is in the middle of a nap. Just the most perfect little porcupine. Now, this is the least favorite part of the job. We have to pick up their poop. We have to pick up a lot of poop, so much of it. With our elephant keepers, they're literally over the year picking up tons of elephant poop, which is kind of cool in a way because all of that can actually be composted and it can be used around the city or in our own exhibits as a sort of fertilizer. So we try to reuse as much as possible in this job too. Now, big animals are the nocturnal animals. So I work with South American animals that live in tropical areas that are most active at night. So chinchillas, owl monkeys, pines. Most all the animals that you've seen so far, except the alpacas, are nocturnal. So this is a little animal called a ringtail. That's Miss Marple. You can see her tiny little feet. And if you look at her toes, you can see she actually has semi-recurved claws that are retractable, similar to a cat, but a little different. So, of course, my alpaca herd. So they are actually relatives of camels, and they're most closely related to llamas. And this animal in South America called vicuña. If you've never heard of them, I definitely recommend looking up. They're really cool looking, super skinny. They look like a camel or a gazelle, but they have this big chest of fur. And so in South America, about 15,000 years ago or so, people started selectively breeding them. Then they domesticated them and they turned into alpacas where they're furry on their entire bodies. And of course, like the rattlesnake you saw me holding earlier, I work with some venomous snakes. So cottonmouths, timber rattlers, and pygmy rattlers. Pygmy rattlers are only about that big. They sound like a bumblebee and they are cute. Now, if you see one in the wild, look at it. Do not touch it though. Now, here's a video of me actually tubing one of our cottonmouths. So just because it's so quick, now how that works is this clear tube and I actually slip it over the head of the snake. A lot of snakes actually like to go into narrow, small spaces because it's safe. So sometimes they'll actually move up the tube a little bit. And if they get far enough inside, I have to grab them right at the base of their body where it meets the tube. Very important that I get this right, because if I do this wrong, the snake actually can turn back around. So I have to make sure that the snake is all the way up, safe for me and for them. But really, I'm focusing on my own safety on this one. But I always have to wear gloves in order to protect me from the venom of the snake and so that I don't get the snakes sick in case I have to do it with multiple snakes in one day. But yeah, that's a pretty fun part of the job. I don't recommend anyone trying this to have proper training. Gotta say that. Please do not touch or move venom. If you do have any in and around your house, call a professional or call me. I would love to move it. Now, another cool animal, a big animal, iconic American animal, the American alligator. So a lot of times we actually have to physically move our gators. If you look between me and Dom, you can see a little bit of Teal, our smallest American alligator. We actually have to sit on her like this. And if you look in front of Dom, you can see there's a little towel. That towel, being held by Melinda here, is actually their eyes. So this is a way that the gator feels safe. So a lot of times in our job, we have to figure out how to make an animal feel calm and safe while we're doing that is really challenging or stressful for the animal. Moving this gator was really important because he ended up in a space that was actually kind of dangerous for him. So we had to physically move him. So we covered his eyes. And of course, we had to tape his mouth with electrical tape so that it didn't strip the skin. And that was a way that we could keep him calm until we can physically move him. And then this big guy, pardon me. So this is a white American alligator. So they're leucistic, and so they don't have, and like we do in our skin. So this isn't like a species or a breed of alligator. It's just a genetic anomaly. It's something that is unusual that shows up on occasion. It doesn't show up that often though, because it's not a very good trait to have in the wild. Alligators need to use their camouflage and their color to hide from the food they're eating and the things that want to eat them when they're a baby, because they're only about that big when they're born or hatched. So this guy actually had to get surgery. So if you look right around here at that silver spot, there's a little bit of blood. We actually had to surgically remove one of his scales. It was growing unusually. So my job in this whole scenario, as you can see, I am laying on my side. My entire job for 45 minutes or so was to literally hold one leg. I had to sit there for that entire time on that shoulder. As you can see, I'm having a great time. But knee pads are important. Always wear your protective equipment, kids and adults. And of course, if you're in a position like that, get comfortable because you're not going to be able to move. Oop, there we go. And of course, I work with most any other animal that is where another team may need my help. So we can sub in, we can help people clean, we can jump over to a different section. So our job isn't static. It's not the same every day, but it can change a lot depending on what new thing is going on or, who needs help. So that is it for my presentation. That is it for these pictures. That's Rico right there. Now, I would love to answer all of you guys' questions.
Awesome. We have so many questions. That was so cool.
Love
okay.
it.
So let's get started. So Gavin wants to, Colin actually wants to know, Gavin's brother, what happens if a venomous snake bites its own tongue?
If it bites its own tongue? That's a great question. I have never seen that happen before, but a snake has a very, very thin tongue. Consider it like my finger. So their venomous teeth, the fangs, are like these canines, right? So their tongue actually fits between them. So it is almost impossible for them to bite their own tongue. That being said, there are some animals who produce toxins and poisons that if they got into a different part of their body, it would poison them. A good example of that is the rough-skinned newt. I've been reading up on them because they're just really cool. They produce the same toxin as the blowfish, tetrodotoxin. Now that toxin is super dangerous. If we were to get that in us, it would definitely kill us. So that toxin is super duper potent, but it's only safe for a newt to have it in its skin. But if that toxin gets into its gut, it would actually kill the newt. So it's important that don't cut themselves or hurt themselves because they can get sick from their own defense. If we were to see that happen with our snakes, I think we would have to act pretty quickly. We'd have to figure out if our snake can take the anti-venom that we would take, because some medications, if we were to give it to the animals, it could actually kill them or get them sick. So we'd have to make a really quick try to intervene and hope for the best in a lot of those cases, because we're just not really prepared for every scenario that could possibly happen. That's an awesome question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so we've got questions from the second and third grade class from Queens in New York.
What's up,
so
Queens?
How did you learn to be a zookeeper in the first place?
Yeah, so I went to school for biology and social psychology. I was just going to school, I was going to just learn the things I wanted to learn. I actually accidentally ended up in zookeeping. Hired at a zoo just looking for a job. Was just a person that helped people off of buses. And as I continued, I found that I loved this more and more. I loved talking to people about it. I loved working with the animals. And I just kind of stumbled my way forward and ended up here today. A lot of people can get experience volunteering with zoos or doing internships, figuring out if it's for, because some folks might be for you or might not. You might not like it. So volunteering and doing intern be a good one if it's for you. And then of course, part-time jobs, getting to know people in the field, and then just applying for the jobs. Apply for them, go for it. I've always loved animals. I love flipping over logs and looking at bugs, picking them up, putting them in my pocket. But I don't recommend putting bugs Your parents they're not gonna love that, and I don't want to get emails about it. But just follow your passion. Learn as much as you can, and you might find yourself doing something that you really love.
Great answer. Another question is, how do you keep their teeth clean? Like, do you ever have to brush an alligator's teeth?
Ideally, no. But one of our big alligators actually does need a little dental work, just because he had a pretty rough life way early on. So we're still seeing the signs of, like, if you don't brush your teeth now. Pardon me, let me close this real quick. Perfect timing. Some of our animals, if they didn't get a proper diet years back, as an adult, just like if we don't brush our teeth, we could see the effects of dental decay or tooth decay later on in life. So most of our animals, we try to give them a diet where we don't have to do anything with their teeth. That's really important. That's the first step. And then if they do need some dental work, like if my alpacas, their bottom teeth constantly grow. So if they start growing in weird, what we can do is to hold them, and then we can try to file down the teeth if they need that. If they don't like it, really stressful, we can do what's called a knockdown. And so a knockdown is basically where, so it is a way that we can put them right sedative so that they're calm the whole time we do the work. And then what we do is we put an injection in there, and that reverses the whole thing. And what's about it is that this animal will go from basically being asleep to immediately being within like 2 minutes. It's like magic. It is one of the wildest things I've ever seen. But when it's an animal that's not dangerous, when you're doing it with a dangerous animal, it's like boom, reversals in, everyone go. So and then we have to watch them to make sure everyone is okay, including the animal. But yeah, that's one of the ways that we can do that. And a really important way is to train the animal to be okay with it. So our birds actually get their beaks trimmed voluntarily.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah.
The next question is from Jennifer Farr. Has an animal ever bitten you?
Yes, I've been bitten plenty. Now, of course, one of the really important things to do is to read your animal's behavior to avoid getting bitten. Just like how if you're out hanging out with your friends and someone like touches you on the shoulder and you're like, hey, stop, and then they don't listen and you get mad. Sometimes that happens with animals too. If you don't listen to what the animal's saying, sometimes they will bite you. I don't recommend you guys bite each other, but it's important to listen to each other, and it's important to listen to animals, especially our dogs and cats at home. It's really easy for us to misread their behavior and think they're having a good time when they're actually scared or nervous. So it's really important for us to learn their behavior too. Now, the animals at the zoo are wild animals, so they make it very obvious when they're not having a good time, but most of them are going to move away from us. The times I've been most, though, is when an animal is trying to grab some food that I'm holding and it misses. So most of the time, it's not that the animals are mean or they want to hurt me. Most of the time, it's by accident. They smell something on my hand and then they're like, ooh, let me eat that. And then so most of the time I try to wash my hands, make sure everything is nice and clean so that the animals don't make mistakes that include having finger food.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
In fact, one of the worst bites I've ever gotten was from an armadillo. Yeah. She was smelling my finger after I'd been holding some bugs. And I was like, oh, cute. She wants to be my friend. And she took my whole finger in her mouth and went, mom, and just smashed it, completely smashed it.
Ouch.
And so, yeah, it took to grow that nail back, but it's beautiful again. Good to go.
Very
Yeah.
good. Wonderful. Gavin wants to know, do you ever use target training? And could you also tell the rest of the crew who may not know what that is, what the heck target training is?
Yeah. Target training is like basic training. It's like the way you start out teaching behaviors. So if I were to want to target, I would introduce this with an obvious tip at the end, maybe like with a ball on the end. And another thing you need to think about before you even get started is, what is your, like, what does it want in life? What kind of food does it want? What things does it enjoy? And when it interacts with the target the way you want it to, you give it that thing. Pretty simple concept. It's called positive reinforcement training. You reward them with the things they want. We don't want to obviously take away stuff that they need to hold that as a reward. We don't want to hold the things they need hostage, but what we want to do is we want to introduce all the good stuff in these training sessions. So target training is I will hold out that stick and I want my animal to investigate. If it's, say, a dog, they smell everything. The first move that a dog does is it smells. So I want it to touch its nose to it. If it were, say, a monkey, the trunk, that is the most important one. With a parrot, to hold that with their beak because they investigate things with their beaks. So you want to think about what does your animal do? And you want to push it towards those behaviors. So you ask it reasonable things that it can perform. When it does those things, touches its nose to the target pole, you reward it. And then what you can do is you can actually start modifying that. So if you want the dog or even the elephant to go in a circle, you basically bring the target around in a circle while it's touching its nose or its trunk to it, and the animal will spin. And so you can introduce these cool behaviors by just moving around or holding the target, introducing a second target, touching the foot, and then it learns to lift the foot up. So it takes a lot of, it's almost like a puzzle. You're like, how do I get to the end goal of this behavior? Like where I'm trimming their nails from this touch your nose to a stick. How do we get there? And you have to figure out a game plan. Then you have to go. And sometimes, just like how if you're traveling somewhere and you get lost and then you have to figure out a new route, sometimes that happens with training too. And it's all about being patient and understanding that if an animal doesn't get it, it's just not understanding. Maybe you need to figure out a different way to tell it because they don't actually speak the same language as us.
For sure.
So yeah, that answers that question.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
The next question is from second graders at Hopewell
Mm.
Elementary in Dublin, Ohio.
What's up, Dublin?
What is the strongest animal at the zoo?
So that's actually a really hard question to answer. And the reason why is because there are a lot of animals that are strong, but they're small. So they're really strong for their size. Like we all know, ants, super strong, but they're very, very tiny. Now, of course, elephants are very strong compared to us, but there are animals like roaches that are super crazy strong. Yeah, roaches are some of the fastest animals on land, and they're just small, so we don't really register it as them being fast. But there have been a couple tests on, I don't remember what species of roach, but it was in a full sprint, and they calculated it based on its size that it might be as fast as a cheetah, maybe even faster. So there are some fast, strong animals out there. Beetles are notoriously strong little guys. They can just pick things up. Ants, invertebrates in general. So the animals that don't have backbones, they can be surprisingly strong without any bones in their body.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
11 vertebrates in this household. So
right? Oh, man.
Great.
Octopi, squids, just.
Yes. The next question is from a second and third grade class in Fallbrook, California. We've got two questions from this group. One is how much poop do elephants poop in a day? And the second is how can chinchillas drink if they can't get wet?
That is a great question. Both those are excellent questions. So elephants, let's see, I believe that our elephants eat somewhere around 75 pounds of food in a day, if I'm remembering correctly, and they are pooping nearly that same amount. Now, the reason why they're pooping that same amount is because a lot of what they're eating are actually just grasses. So elephants eat plant matter. They don't take a lot from that. Not a lot goes actually into their body for storage, and most of it comes out. Only use, I think some numbers have estimated 25% possibly. There might be an actual more accurate number. It's been a while since I've thought about this in a while. But they don't store a lot of the nutrients that they get from their food, especially like grasses. That stuff doesn't go into their body. So they have to eat a ton of it, literal sometimes. So elephants are going to eat possibly up to over 100 pounds of food in a day. And they're going to be pooping like 50, 60 pounds of that food right back out. So our elephant keepers, they have to use basically construction equipment in order to clean a lot of that up. They have to use like earth movers in order to get that poop out of the exhibit. Yeah. What was the second question? Chinchillas drinking water?
How do they drink if they can't get wet?
Yeah, great question. They have to do it very strategically. So, of course, in the wild, a chinchilla is going to live in, it's going to be really high elevation, dry area. They're built for it. So if there is any dew, a chinchilla is going to lick it up. When there's moisture in their food, that's how they get a lot of their moisture also. And of course, when they get to a puddle, they're going to want to avoid stepping in the puddle, but they're going to go to the edge of it, drink, and they have to do so very, very delicately with their tongues. So at the zoo, we have what are called Lixit bottles. So little bottles with the little ball in the end, like you might see in a hamster cage. And the animals are trained to know that if they lick that ball, water comes out. So they can do that, and it's not very messy. But it's my job also to make sure that that thing isn't leaking. Otherwise, their enclosure is going to get wet, and then I got to towel off a chinchilla, which they don't like.
No. Cool. Thanks. Mrs. Luckenbaugh's class wants to know, what is the best part about being a zookeeper?
Best part. That's tough. There are a lot of different parts that I really, really like. But obviously, well, okay, one of my favorite parts is when you are working with an animal and you're trying to train it, here just isn't getting it. And then all of a sudden you see that light bulb off where the animal finally understands what you're asking it. And sometimes it takes time for it to get in there. And sometimes it's just the animal's a little afraid and it has to get over that. And sometimes it just happens to be a good day where the animal finally figures it out, just like how we have that aha moment and we finally get it. Sometimes animals have that. And when you can see it, it's so cool. I really appreciate those moments. Those ones are fantastic. Sometimes it is the opportunity to hand raise a little animal. Man, some of those babies are cute.
Yeah.
Some are not, but some very much are cute. But when you get to build a relationship with them from like one, man, that's really cool. Sometimes the circumstances aren't great when you are having to hand raise them because sometimes it's that something with mom,
Right.
but you can, and then times you can reintroduce them, and then when they get to build their own relationship, get to see that spectacular.
Yeah.
Also, I love talking to people. So when I get those moments to talk to people that show up to the zoo, man, it's like I come alive because I actually, our job is important, but one of the most important things that we do is we impact the public. We help folks like you guys understand more about wildlife, ecosystems, and their value. And when I can actually directly share that, love it.
Feels
A
good.
plus, 10 out of 10. Favorite.
It seems like your job has so many just like special moments. If
Yeah, there are.
Pretty good, pretty good. The next
Yeah.
question is from Marie. Do you ever get scared of hurting the animals? For example, like with the gators, when you have to sit on them.
Mhm.
Like, are you ever worried about hurting them when you sit on them?
Yeah, absolutely. We're always thinking about that. You have to find that perfect amount of like force or strength that you have to use in order to restrain an animal but not hurt it. It's really, really tough to do. I work with 200 bats inside of my nocturnal building, and catching a bat is stressful because they are so tiny and they're so strong, but also agile at the same time in ways that you might not expect. So if you have to catch a bat with your hands, you have to do it just right so that you don't injure the bat. So that is like the top thing we're thinking of. It's like, keep myself safe, keep the animal safe, keep the animal trained. That's kind of how we think about it. And of course, keeping the animal restrained is part of our own safety. So we're always thinking about those two things. Those are very, very important. But yeah, we want to make sure our animals are always safe when we're training them. That's top priority. We actually have figured out a lot of ways to do it, and as you can see, that are kind of unconventional. So tubing the snakes is a good way to do it, where it's kind of actually hard to hurt them if you do it right. With restraining the gators, it's tough to hurt them if you do it right. So that they can do it right. And then they get it, practice and experience so that they can do it without even having to think about it. Just like how we can walk and not have to think about, I have to walk right. I got to do this each time. If you have the muscle memory, then it's easy to do it where no one gets hurt. So it's important that we're also training each other how to do things correctly.
For sure. Awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you. This is a question from Sarah Krieger. How competitive is your job field?
It's very competitive. It's surprising because if you think about it, only one zoo in each city, and in a lot of regions there may be only one zoo, and there are a lot of people who may want to do the job. So it can be pretty competitive. That being said, I don't think people should let that discourage them. It just means, build your skills, because not all skills for zookeeper include actual animal caretaking. It's really important to, learn how to use power tools, learn how to build a fence, learn how to dig a hole. Some people don't really know how to use a broom. Practice using a broom, learn the skill of it. There are all sorts of tiny skills that can be so helpful. I did construction for a handful of years when I was in college just to get by. And that actually ended up helping me a lot in a ton of different jobs. So, you have no idea what skills you're learning now that are going to actually help you. I used to say all the time, when am I ever going to use this when learning almost thing? And now as an adult, I'm like desperately trying to remember how to calculate like the hypotenuse of a triangle and like all sorts of stuff that I never thought was going to be valuable. So it's important.
Okay,
Did I
sorry.
freeze?
You did for a sec, but
Okay, cool.
at the end of the sentence, so I think we're good. But yeah, I think like manual labor skills are so undervalued
Yeah.
until you get to the point where you need them. Like I
Mm.
for those of you at home that don't know, I'm a squid biologist, and the amount of plumbing I did in my job is wild.
Yeah.
I've gotten good at like hooking up electrical outlets that you have to like, deal with the wires and hooking everything up right. Like
Hmm.
electrician work and plumbing, both huge. They never tell you
It's
that when you're in school, but it
yeah,
is
it's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And even outside of work, sometimes that stuff can be so useful at your own home.
Okay.
You have a busted pipe and you're like, oh, I know how to turn off the water main and I can actually replace this pipe, until I can get a plumber to really do a good job.
Right.
Uh,
But I know about how to properly connect to PVC pipes. I only know that from being a squid biologist. You never know.
yeah.
Handy. The next question is from Georgia. Are you involved in any breeding programs?
That's a great question. I am. About half of my animals are breeding, either actively or potentially. Just had a birth the other day. I can't disclose what species it is, but I've been working hard to get them comfortable in their environment so that they can breed. But we have numerous really important, critically endangered animals that we are breeding at my facility. One of them includes the pine snake, super important. Tomistoma, which is what used to be called the false gharial, but is now considered a gharial. For those of you guys who don't know what animal that is, it looks like a crocodile or an alligator with a very long snout. They're typically found in South Asia, India mostly. So we have a ton of animals, and most zoos that are committed to the mission are participating in some way or another with these species survival plans, and those are super important. Now, with the wildlife breeding, sometimes those animals don't actually get released, because that is a big geopolitical thing that you have to like. It can take upwards of 10 years just to introduce one or two animals. So it can be a challenge, but we want to make sure that the animals that we have under human management and care are ready genetically to go into the wild in case the political environment makes it possible. So a lot of times trumpeter swans get bred in zoos and then they get released. So if you guys see trumpeter swans in the wild from a distance, you may be seeing an animal that was bred at a zoo and then released when it was young. So there are a lot of little small ones. I worked at a zoo in the past that was breeding Wyoming toads. It's really cool because they are the most, I think, endangered amphibian in North America. They're they're just this little tiny toad, super cute, amazing. So they would just produce froglets and toadlets, and then like in the thousands, and then release them. I think one year was like 9,000 between three different zoos, and they released them all in the wild. And it also requires the people whose land they're releasing it on to agree to the mission, protect these toads, to be okay with a bunch of strangers coming up and surveying their land. That's a big ask. That's like someone saying, hey, can I walk through your house? here, that's a lot to ask. So we always appreciate being able to build these relationships with the public. So the breeding programs can be complicated at most, and it's just simple animals together and let them do their thing.
Very cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
PG wants to know, have you ever talked to a bird, and does the bird talk to you?
Oh, first of all, I always talk to all of my animals. I am a zookeeper, which means that I'm having full conversations with these guys. Not a lot of them are talking back. They're more like, hey, give me food, and I'm just here. But yeah, actually, a lot of our parrots that I've worked with have been trained to do vocal behaviors. So I can train them to do things like say, all right, with whenever I do a thumb. So they'll talk back in that regard. But if you think about it, our animals are always communicating with us non-verbally. So if I'm doing anything, my animal is going to respond to it, whether it is fear or whether it is curiosity or whether it wants to investigate or whether it smells something interesting or whether it's just sleepy and it's I'm going to sleep by just going into its little sleep area.
Right.
So in a sense, they are always talking to us, always telling us something.
Right.
To figure out what they're telling us.
Cool. The next question is from Mason. Do you ever have to bring the animals back to your house, like maybe when they're babies or when they're sick or?
So, yeah, there are instances in which some animals are either taken care of or reared outside of the facility. Those are very special circumstances, and we do that less and less than we used to in the past, just because our home environments can introduce diseases.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we're keeping a quarantine between ourselves and our facility. But that being said, we also participate in rehabilitation. So for those of you guys who don't know what that word is, it's basically when an animal is hurt or sick or orphaned in the you get them to a point where they can either be reintroduced or they can be housed at a zoo or at a lab center or anything like that. So in those cases, sometimes the animal does go back to our house if we have the permits, if we have the training and the knowledge, and we are trustworthy. Because you don't want to give a otter and then they like keep that otter. So, so the people who are trained rehabbers may actually take the animal home and rehab them so that the facility can keep open space in case there are injuries in their own population. So yeah, I don't personally, because I don't like a lot of animals inside my home. I spend 8 to 10 to 12 hours taking care of animals every day. I want to come home and just relax.
Fair, I get it.
Yeah.
All right, the next question's from Panav. How do snakes turn around in a tube if the tube is very narrow?
Great question. So a snake's body is typically much larger than its head. So sometimes with cottonmouth, their body could be as thick as this, but their head is only that big. And their spine is really, really flexible. So they can turn fully around on themselves. So that's why we have to make sure that their body is filling up the entire center part. Because if you really think about it, a snake is almost entirely backbone and ribs. But their backbone is much more flexible than ours because ours is built to support our body while we're standing up. A snake, however, to be able to move and get into narrow spaces and squeeze around. In fact, almost every bone in a snake's body is flexible too. Like their ribs can bend a lot. So it's actually really easy for a snake to turn around on itself in a tube. When you see it, it really looks like it's going to break itself in half, but they can manage it. It's pretty wild.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
The next question, and I think the last question we're going to have time for, is from John's 5th grade class. How do you all decide on the names for the animals?
Ooh, that's a good question. Sometimes that is a point of contention. It's like Game of Thrones. But no, usually it will be either the zoo or institution wants to let the public out. They'll kind of do a poll in-house and then they'll give the public options, or they'll let the public figure out the names. Sometimes they'll name them after someone who is special to us or someone who is an important iconic figure. For example, I named Gigi, our porcupine, after Gianna Bryant. So after people who are important can be another way to show solidarity or respect to them. a really cool thing is, sometimes you'll just like name an animal because you're and it has that face. Um, Sometimes you can name an animal based on a word and a language that is, native to the region. You do want to be careful with that. You want to make sure you're understanding the context of what you're actually naming the animal. I've seen some pretty big goof ups on that. Makes it with hope. So you want to make sure that you know what you're actually naming them. And then on top of that, you can also name the animal after, like things from our childhood. Occasionally animals get named after Pokemon, sometimes the animals get named after cartoons that are similar. Like we had a goose named Goose God, who is named after a character from Courage the Cowardly Dog. Sometimes it's just for fun and for goofs. Yeah, so that's how we decide. And if we all agree and if management agrees, then it's a go. And then we put that name in the system and then we're good to go.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. So we always ask everybody the same 2 questions at the end of every session. The first question is, if you had everyone's attention in the whole world and you could tell them one thing about zookeeping, what would it be?
Oh man, that's a tough question. Please don't throw random food to my animals.
Solid. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a rule I can follow.
That's my one.
Okay,
yeah.
Sounds good. And then your second question is, you still have everybody's attention in the whole world.
Okay, let's go.
One thing about anything you want. This is your opportunity to spread something. What do you tell everybody?
Go outside.
Great.
See some animals. Go, be a part of nature. And I think my most biggest thing is protect your local ecosystems. You can't do without them and you can't replace them.
It's true. Solid advice. I think I'm going to try to take that advice right now because it's the sunny day we've had in a while up in Philadelphia. Is there anything else that you'd like to plug? Where can we find you on social media? This is your chance to say whatever to this group.
Yeah, you can find me at Alexi Grousis on Instagram. The only thing I'll plug is, get outside. It's springtime, get that fresh air. Once you're vaccinated, go do safe activities that are enriching and fun. If you do see a snake, tell that snake thank you. That snake is doing amazing things for us in the wild and we love them.
Thank you, snakes.
Beautiful. Thank you, snakes.
Thank you, snakes. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your cool knowledge with us. If we didn't get to your question today, I'm really sorry. We had a lot of questions today. So we tried to get to as many as we possibly could. What else is housekeeping wise? Next week, we've got 2 environmental science talks on Monday and Tuesday. And by talks, I mean conversations like we had today. So you can check that all out on skypeascientist.com/events. Thursday nights, we always have trivia. You can join us for that. That's for the adults. So teachers, if you want to do some science trivia on your Thursday night, I hope you come. You can learn more about that on our Instagram at instagram.com/skypeascientist. Other than that, I hope you can, if you can, support us on patreon.com/skypeascientist. Our program is entirely donor supported. So we would really appreciate that. Otherwise, yeah, go outside, get some vitamin D, sniff a flower or plant, thank a snake. Erin, thank you for signing for us. We always appreciate you so much. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.